What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin once again coming to you from the Big Blue Nation, and today I was going to talk to you about Sansevieria masoniana. Now, you probably heard this plant called by many different names. I think when it first was introduced, it was called Mason's Congo. I know it as the whale fin plant. It's also called the shark's fin plant. It's also been called St. George's sword. And I believe it's also called the viper's bowstring hemp. And that's just because the kind of fibers that are down in this plant actually are very popular and used in making bowstrings. So it does have very many different common names, but Sansevieria masoniana is its scientific name. It's a really great plant to have. It's a really easy plant to care for. It's really unique with its broad kind of paddle-shaped leaves, and you can tell there's a lot of coloration down through here. Now, this plant is, I haven't really had this guy this long, though I've had one in the past, but this guy probably got about half a year, just 9 months ago, something like that. When I got him in the mail, he kind of had a little damage on him, but I was satisfied with his height, his width, and like I said, there was a little bit of deadness. It's dried up a little bit. I think that's just because of the move. I had to shift him around a couple of times just to get him to where I kind of feel most comfortable at with him now. So I think he's actually improving. I'm not going to say that I didn't hurt him any. So, but these are tough plants. Any of the mother-in-law's tongue or snake plants that they're also called, they're almost considered plants of steel. And that's just because they can take a wide range of the light spectrum. They can be in fairly dark areas. I mean, they do have to have some light, but they also do really well on the opposite end in really kind of bright filtered light for about 4 to 6 hours, something around that kind of area also. So that's one reason why they're considered extremely easy plants to take care of, very low maintenance plants. And if you have it in an area that doesn't get a whole lot of light, it doesn't need a whole lot of water either. But just like any other plant, if you put it in a bright light situation and then the heat kind of goes up, the temperature goes up, the lights go up, the water intake level needs to go up also. So just keep that in the back of your mind because if you're giving this plant kind of a brighter area with brighter direct light, it's going to need more water. And actually, that's kind of the best scenario for them is to put them in a brighter area. But if you don't have that and you kind of have a little dark area that you think maybe a plant would look good there, I give one of these guys a try because they do kind of well in lower light areas also. But that doesn't mean that you can take their light away because they do need light. I think some people say that they also make really good office plants. Now, I'm not sure if the whale's fin does. I've always kind of kept it in a semi-bright area, but the mother-in-law's tongue, I think the Sansevieria trifasciata, they do really well also in kind of false light areas where the artificial light kind of helps them, like in an office or in schools or anything like that in malls. But like I said, this guy, he kind of does like a little bit of light. Now, these plants are native to kind of the Democratic Republic of Congo, kind of right on the equator. So yeah, they do come from very warm, humid, tropical areas, but like I said, they do kind of like filtered bright light. I mean, they'll kind of get that through the canopy, but they do take some light pretty well, so it's kind of hit or miss. You kind of have to play around with them. Like I said, I've got mine. They do really well in a northern facing window, like right in the windowsill. You don't have to have like a curtain or sheer or anything to kind of block that out. But if you do have them in kind of a west or east or south facing window, especially in a south-facing window, I would make sure you have at least blinds and have it back a little bit because they can thrive in a south-facing window, but they can't have direct sunlight on them longer than about 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours. And that's if you've introduced them the right way to the sunlight. Because if you've gotten these guys from a store, say your Lowe's or Home Depot, where they've sat inside for a while, they're not going to be used to the direct sunlight. So introduce them slowly because their leaves will dry out and burn and look really bad. And here in a little bit, I'll show you how to go ahead and kind of remove that off. And they typically won't grow right here. So once this has happened, that's the way that leaf is going to look from now on. Some people actually believe that you can cut down into the green part. This is all dead right here, so I won't cut any lower to it. Like I said, you're not going to be getting any other growth on top of that. So I'll just go ahead and remove all that myself. Once again, I always say sanitize your pruning shears, either with alcohol, rubbing alcohol, or hot hot soap and water. And like I said, make sure that they are really good, sanitized, and that they are sharp, because you want to remove all that dead area there. And if you can help it, try not to cut down into the green. Just kind of cut where it's dead and remove that there, and your plant will be just fine. Now in this kind of situation, I've used these really narrow pruning shears so that I could get in there and allow for easy movement. If you kind of have the bulkier ones, you might have a little bit of a tough time getting in narrow to this area. And like I said, you don't really want to expose any kind of green tissue because that's kind of inviting in any kind of disease or pest or anything like that that could potentially harm your plant. Now all this area right here is dead, so as long as I stay on that line, this guy shouldn't get anything in the way of disease or infection. But if you do kind of see that you've got a huge gaping area that you accidentally cut into, don't fear. Just take yourself some cinnamon. It's an antifungal, and it will actually cause a little bit of an area of protection for your plant right there. So just sprinkle 100% cinnamon on there, and wherever any kind of green fleshy area shows through this brown area, because you will be inviting in any kind of disease or anything. But like I said, cinnamon is actually a good antifungal, antimicrobial, so just put it over any kind of area that you think you may have actually opened up an area to invite any kind of disease or pest in or anything like that, or any kind of fungus. Just sprinkle some cinnamon on there and you'll be good. And just kind of let it sit on there for a while, and you can wash it off after a day or two, but I would at least leave it on for a couple of days, and then it should be fine on its own right there. But other than that, I kind of like the way it looks. They are kind of slow growers. It really just depends on the kind of situation you have it in. If you have it where it's a really bright area, it gets about 4 to 6 hours of direct filtered light, it will kind of grow a little bit faster, but these plants do grow a little bit on the slow side. And with the masoniana, the whale's fin, don't believe they are toxic, but the ASPCA classifies the Sansevieria fasciata as toxic to cats and dogs. That can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. But I believe this guy right here, he's actually okay to have. They also are very good at cleansing the air. And in that aspect, a lot of people actually think that they're really good kind of bedroom plants because they're really good at filtering the air around the plant. So it can remove any kind of toxic chemicals or anything like that and kind of displace that with some fresh oxygen. So they're really great plants to have in the house, especially if you have stale or musky air and you think that it might be a little toxic or any kind of toxins in your house. The snake plants are very good at filtering those out. So one or two, you might kind of hit or miss, but a couple of them will actually really take care of your air and yourself also. And they really don't ask much in the way of that either. They don't need a lot of misting or humidity. They like the same kind of temperatures we do. I believe it's because they're, you know, from the equator, so they like about maybe 60, 65 is the lowest, up into about 70, 80, 85. And they don't like it too much hotter than that, so you can actually put these outside if you're in like, I think 9B, 10A, somewhere around in there. But they will be great plants outside, but they are very frost tender plants. So they will die if it gets down into the kind of freezing areas around your area also. So some people will set them outside, but make sure that they do kind of have some protection from the heat and the direct sunlight in the hottest part of the day. So they will burn, especially if they're just out there for the first time. So you'll just want to keep an eye on that. Feeding, I don't do a whole lot of feeding in the way of this. With the soil, these guys kind of like it a little acidic. I think they like anywhere from 6 to 6.5 on up to 8 for a pH. So they can go slightly acidic to slightly kind of base or slightly alkaline. So the best kind of soil for them is a soil that's kind of made more for the succulent and cacti citrus family. And that's because it's got a lot of sand in that, and it will also help them drain with the water that gets in there. So if you just have regular kind of potting soil, that's not going to be good for your Sansevieria. It will actually rot. They are very prone to root rot and rotting with a whole lot of water. So make sure that you don't mess up like I did and put it in a pot that has a saucer on it, because if you do, every time you water this guy and the excess water sits there, you want to go ahead and dump that out too. So tip your pot over and make sure that there's not a whole lot of water in the way of that saucer, or your snake plant will actually kind of rot and succumb to rot fairly easy. So make sure you kind of are mindful of that as well. Other than that, if you want to add in some sand to your potting mix, that would probably help with the drainage as well. I would go in the way of builder's sand, just because they kind of wash that a little bit more than other sand to remove some of the silt and other kind of stuff that's in there. So builder's sand is actually kind of ideal if you're going to be adding any of that into your potting mix. Some perlite might help too, but when choosing a pot, I would probably go in the way of something terracotta, because that will whisk the water away from the soil and won't keep it in there to where it would actually harm your plant. So terracotta is a good pot to put these guys in too. And again, I wouldn't even use a pot that has a saucer built into it, or even those little plastic saucers that you can kind of sit underneath there to catch the water, because your plant will probably rot if it has a lot of standing water in there. I think that the Sansevieria, there is a genus of about 70 species of flowering plants, and they are native to, all of them are kind of native to the areas of Africa, Madagascar, and southern Asia. So I do have other snake plants that I'll probably talk about in the upcoming videos, but I believe this one is actually my favorite one. Now, if you get online and look, they are kind of expensive, and that's just because it's going to take a lot of time for these guys to get to the size that they are really known for, and they're thick, kind of beautiful petal-like leaves that do have a lot of different kind of colors in there. So they're really great plants to have, and I looked it up, and I heard these guys can really only live to be about 10 to maybe 25 years old, and that really just depends on the kind of care that you're giving the plant, because, I mean, obviously some people can kind of kill plants faster than others, but some people really kind of take care of their plants and know what they need and want, and those people are actually going to get their plants to live a little bit longer than the rest of us probably would be able to. And as I said, I've had him for a little over a half a year now, and I really haven't had too many problems with him. He's always been really good in the form of the light I've given him, the substrate, and the amount of water. Now you'll notice that these guys are able to get to a rather large size. I want to say the leaves when full grown can be almost about 4 feet long and about 10 inches wide. So they can actually get to a pretty decent size for a plant. So if you're one of those guys that like to actually have a plant that gets to be a really great size, this guy will actually get there, but it will probably take a while for them to actually do that. And in the tropics and then their natural habitat, if they were anywhere else in the world, their cells that are able to hold so much water in the wintertime would kind of leach and explode, and then they would die because it would get so cold down around the freezing temperatures. But since that never happens around the equator, these guys are able to get to a rather large size, and that's what we're kind of striving for in our environment too. And these guys kind of fit that with us because of the temperatures they like, the amount of water, and the amount of light that we have are a little conducive more for this kind of plant. So in the wintertime, of course, it's going to have to be indoors, and they're not going to really go dormant because they're around the tropics there. And I think their kind of area, they probably have a little bit more wetter conditions around their wintertime than we do, but here in Kentucky it does get pretty wet in the wintertime as well. But yeah, other than that, that's really all I know about these guys. I know they are flowering plants, and I've talked about that. It is kind of hard to see them flower indoors, but it can happen if all the conditions are met. So don't be surprised one day if you see anything along those lines. Other than that, let me know if you guys have any kind of questions or concerns about these plants. They're extremely easy to take care of, great plants for beginners. So if you know anybody that might have an animal that likes to chew on them, these guys should be a little bit on the safer side. I know that Sansevieria trifasciata isn't going to be good if you do have cats or dogs. But this, I've had this around for a while, and I've got 3 cats, and I've never had any kind of problem with the dog also. And I know my cats actually have access to it. None of them have chewed on it. Pieces of the leaves haven't really fallen off to where they would actually go and find it and gnaw on it or anything like that. But in the way of pests, you will kind of see aphids in the soil, mealybugs, spider mites also. But just like any other kind of pest, if you take them outside, spray them off with a water hose, that'll kind of knock them off. If that's not successful, I would take a washcloth of isopropyl alcohol and rub the leaves down, and that'll knock off anything else that is kind of stuck to your plant as well. Other than that, don't forget, hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.